everyone, welcome to our Introduction to Personality Theory course. And we're continuing studying and learning new information about so-called intrapsychic domain. Last videos, we discussed different aspects of intrapsychic domain, which were studied in the different psychoanalytical and psychodynamic theories, starting from classical psychoanalysis of Sigmund Freud and up to modern neo-Freudian ego psychology, contemporary psychoanalysis, and finally neo-analytic movements. We discussed that in great detail, and today we need to continue with the other groups of theories in this domain, and those theories primarily focused on studying motivation. Motivation is considered to be key to understanding of personality. If you know what a person desires and wants, you can understand their personality. This is the main idea for this group of theories we will study in the next videos. So we need to tackle several problems and answer several questions. What is motivation? And what are the differences between motives, needs, and motivation in general? We'll discuss Murray's theory of motivation and so-called big three motives. After that, we will study in more detail Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which some of you might know because of the Introduction to Psychology course, but we will learn some new information about that. Then we will discuss Carl Rogers' client-centered approach, another theory in this domain. And finally, we will discuss modern theory of motivation, so-called self-determination theory, created by DC and Ryan, one of the most recent theories in the field of motivation. So let's start from the beginning, and we'll try to define what is motivation. Actually, defining what is motivation is kind of a tricky task, because on the one hand, everyone knows intuitively what is motivation. On the other hand, there are so many different definitions and approaches to how to study motivation and how to measure it and how to study it properly. So we will use American Psychological Association dictionary, trying to define what we mean. Actually, in this dictionary, there are three definitions for motivation. The first one is that it's impetus that gives purpose or direction to behavior and operates in humans at a conscious and unconscious level. Yes. In conditioning, so regarding most learning and behavioral theories, it's all variables which collectively alter effectiveness of reinforces. This is the definition we won't use in this lecture. And finally, a person's willingness to exert physical or mental effort in pursuit of a goal or outcome. So we will rely on the first and the third definitions when we try to define what is motivation in today's lecture. So basically, when we say motivation, we mean some kind of internal force which gives you energy and direction to do something, right? To achieve some goals, to pursue something, to behave in a certain direction. It's very general and broad, as you can see, so I wouldn't call these definitions as a very satisfying, because basically because of how broad they are, it adds some ambiguity and uncertainty, but still we use the best we have at the moment. So actually, the field of motivation still waits new researchers, and maybe in upcoming years, we will see new, more comprehensive theories in that field. So final, like bonus definition is motivation as an active process of encouraging others to do something. Yeah, because we often use the term of motivation as to motivate someone to do something, but it's usually applied to organizational psychology and industrial psychology field, so we won't use this definition either. So it's important to mention. What are relationships between personality and motivation? To answer this question, we need to be a bit more clear with terminology. So motives are so-called internal states that arouse and direct behavior towards specific objects and goals. So we can say that our motivation can be understood as like an umbrella term for more specific concepts like motives. Usually, as we said several seconds ago, it helps to give us energy, arousal, and direct behavior towards specific objects or goals. For example, your activity, a learning activity to study this lecture material is directed and supported by certain motives you might have. Actually, it can be very different motives. Why are you studying? Some people studying because they like what they're studying, they're actually interested in the topic. But some people studying because they're motivated by the grades, they want higher GPA, or money because they think if they complete this course, their salary will be bigger. Some people motivated by meeting group mates. So for some people, they're coming to classes to meet people and communicate, and it's a primary motive why they're trying to study. So there could be very different reasons why people actually involve in certain types of activities, and those motives would be very different for different people. Each of us have unique patterns of motivation. So motives often based on needs, states of tension within a person. So we usually distinguish the concepts of needs and motives, though some psychologists suppose it's a full synonyms. I suppose that it's better to distinguish those concepts as a bit different. So need just create a tension within a person, some sort of a deficit you might experience, the lack of something, but it doesn't necessarily start and direct a certain type of behavior. Until you understand what exactly do you need, you cannot start acting, right? You might feel tension and discomfort, but before you will understand what do you need exactly, for example, you want to eat, or you want to learn something new, or you want to communicate with people, you cannot start activity. So experience of needing something doesn't necessarily mean action. For action, you need to have an active motive. Motives can be very different, and they vary in type, amount, and intensity. So some of our activities are directed by one single motive, while others are so-called poly-motivated. Poly derives from Latin word many. So poly-motivation means that your activity is directed by several different motives at once. It's very typical for most of human type of activities. And intensity of motives also can vary. So basically, you can be strongly motivated and not, and it also affects how you behave and what type of activities you involve in. So one of the pioneers in the field of studying motivation, especially in North America, was famous psychologist Henry Murray. He is also famous because he's a researcher on personality, and he is considered to be one of the fathers of personality psychology in North America. So we definitely should mention his name when we speak about motivation. He tried to distinguish different concepts in this field. So on the slide, you can see his definition of need. He defines need as a potentiality or readiness to respond in a certain way under certain given circumstances. It is a noun which stands for the fact that a certain trend is apt to recur. So as you can see, it's quite an old definition, 1938, but it's still one of the most comprehensive definitions of what need can be. Murray believed that needs refers to states of tension, and that satisfying the need reduces the tension. Now it's known as so-called homeostasis principle. Probably you know the word homeostasis from physiology. In physiology, it means the internal consistency of environment inside us. For example, homeostasis may the concept of homeostasis may be applied to the blood when there is a fluctuation in the amount of oxygen and glucose in your blood. You start acting to restore the balance. So if there is not enough glucose, you feel hungry and you eat something to restore it. If there is not enough oxygen, you might experience headache and you experience an impulse to open windows or go outside to breathe fresh air to restore this internal balance. Regarding the motivation, many theories adopted this idea that you might have an optimal level of tension, internal tension, and if the tension rises, you experience discomfort and thus become more active to remove this tension and return to the initial state. By this, you maintain internal balance of tension. So in psychology of motivation, it's called homeostasis principle. And Murray's theory, one of the examples of how this homeostasis principle is used. Not all theories in the field of motivation use this principle, and later in our videos, we'll discuss possible alternatives to this principle. Murray also believed that sometimes people might actually seek to increase tension. This actually is an idea contrary to the principle of homeostasis. So, for example, people might go on a roller coaster ride or go to view a horror movie. Such type of activities increase the tension you might have. So, but for some people, they're still desirable. But some people try to avoid such type of activities. So, in this sense, Murray's theory both utilizes homeostasis principle, but in some part contradicts it, which makes this theory not fully logically consistent, unfortunately. So, Murray tried to classify needs, and he distinguished two main groups. The first group is so-called primary or viscerogenic needs, and another group is so-called secondary or psychogenic needs. So he tried to classify them that way. Basically, most of needs which we experience according to Murray, are so-called psychogenic needs. So because they're not primary in terms of maintaining survival. So when you want to buy a new iPhone model, or you wish to study at more prestigious university, or you want to have a pay rise, it's not about your survival and physiology, right? It's so-called secondary needs, socially constructed needs, that you have only because you was raised and learned a lot in a certain type of society at a certain period of time. So according to Murray, each need is associated with specific desire or intention, particular set of emotions, and specific action tendencies, and each need can be described with trait names. So it's three components of each need, according to Henry Murray. Murray created a long list of different needs. He even tried to put them into certain hierarchy acknowledging the fact that not all needs are equally important for people. But his attempt to create this hierarchy caused a lot of criticism from his colleagues. The problem with such type of an approach is that how you decide how many needs will be included into your list. 5, 10, 25, 105, because most of needs, as you can see on the slide, can be defined through different words. And we basically can merge several needs together, or in contrast, be super detailed and distinguish them very strictly. It creates a problem of how many needs we will include in the list without no definitive answer. And the second problem, how you put them into hierarchies. So basically, you can choose a bit different foundations for your classification, and each time you will get a different classification of needs. It actually what happened in personality psychology and psychology of motivation in 20th century. So most of theories offer different understanding and different definitions to those needs. So Murray also used an interesting concept of so-called press. It's a need relevant aspects of the environment. He tried to distinguish alpha press and beta press, which is actually an interesting idea. Basically, alpha press, it's an objective reality as it is, but we're people. We do not perceive reality objectively. Our perception is selective. We are biased and motivated. So we always perceive so-called beta press, how we actually perceive reality, and it creates different situations. So sometimes let's discuss a couple of examples. Maybe you need to pass an exam, and it's an objective reality, right? So it will be the part of alpha press. But how you perceive this exam, as important or not, as a complex or not, will affect how much time you will invest into preparation and how nervous and anxious you will be before the exam. So sometimes the exam is objectively easy or moderate, but a person perceives it as a super important, and it creates so much tension, which makes the exam more complicated, actually. The opposite might happen. A person can underestimate the objective complexity of the exam and do not prepare accordingly. So it can create different scenarios of behavior because alpha press and beta press not coincide, and we can mistake in how we perceive reality, and it affects our motivation, the states of needs and tension, and our behavior. So it's an interesting concept of press, which Murray used in his theory. Murray also famous for introducing so-called thematic perception test, or TATE. It's one of the first tests in the field of motivation, which actually still used nowadays, though it was created almost 90 years ago by Morgan and Murray. Morgan was his colleague. The test consists of 31 tables of black and white photographic images. Basically, the task of a person is to describe what is represented on the picture. So it's a so-called projective test because those pictures are intentionally ambiguous. So if you take a look at the picture, you basically can see different possible stories behind what's happening on the picture, right? So what emotions people on this picture might experience, and so on. The primary idea is that different people create different stories based on the same ambiguous pictures, and by writing down those stories and analyzing them according to certain procedures, you can learn a lot about the motivation of a person. Usually, all 31 tables not used simultaneously. Most often, psychologists take only 20 or less pictures based on their choice and conduct psychological assessment. As I said, the task of the participant is both easy and hard. So it's easy in terms of instructions, hard in terms of how much time it takes and efforts. So let's take a look at a couple of different pictures from this test. Again, you can create very different stories based on what you see. For example, on this slide, you can see an elderly woman and a younger man. Are they related somehow? What emotions they possibly experience? What happened before this picture was taken, right? You can create several very different stories, and they will be informative for psychologists in terms of how you perceive it will be your projections of your inner world and motivation. And actually, it can tell a lot about you and your personality. This technique, TAT, used in individual diagnostics. So you cannot conduct this in the group of people. You can use it only one-on-one, often in the psychotherapeutic process. But this technique is quite time-consuming. So yes, it can provide a lot of information, but unfortunately, it usually takes from 1 to 2 hours to conduct such a psychological assessment, which is really, really time-consuming. And another disadvantage of this technique is that you need to complete special training to be able to conduct TAT, because without special preparation, you will completely misinterpret all the stories people produce in these tests, and your analysis will be incorrect and biased. So, as all projective tests, it requires additional training, which is important. Here are examples of some pictures from these tests. Again, they all intentionally ambiguous, and you can describe them in dozens of different ways. So it's very interesting to hear what people tell based on each picture. Coming to so-called big three motives. The works of Murray sparked an interest of other researchers who tried to research and study motivation. And eventually, nowadays, it's considered that there are at least 3 very universal motives all people have, and it's called the big 3 motives. So basically, those 3 motives are the need for achievement, need for power, and need for intimacy. Their naming is very self-explanatory, so I won't provide you with much clarification on this matter. Need for achievement is like typical need for most of people. We all time after time want to achieve success and win something, sometimes in competitions with other people, sometimes in competition with time and ourselves. But some people experience more need for achievement, so-called go-getters. And some people experience less, so they less motivated by proving their skills and knowledge, and they less like competitions. The need for power is connected with the desire to command other people. Again, some people want power, lost it, right? And they like to command other people. They like when others obey their orders. They want to dominate. And some people experience less need for power, but time after time, we all experience this motive because it's attractive and pleasant to affect the situation and decision-making and behavior of other people at some extent. And finally, the need for intimacy is connected with the need for communication, but it's important that it's about emotional, warm, and deep communication and relationships. So it's not about big amount of superficial communication. It's mostly about the desire to build some long-term, long-lasting relationships built on sharing emotions and desires and deep thoughts, not necessarily romantic relationships, but just very deep relationships with some person when you really know each other. There are some interesting facts and a lot of research behind of each motive and its correlation with different personality traits and so on. So all this research is like hundreds and thousands and dozens of thousands research articles made in 20th and 21st century. So I wouldn't tell about all the results. I just pick up several interesting key findings, which I think would be great to know for everyone who studies personality psychology. So the first one is about the need for achievement. People with high achievement motivation, as I described, they feel desire to do better, to be successful, and feel competent in everything they're doing. And those people surprisingly prefer moderately hard tasks. Actually, initially, people suppose that those people will choose the hardest task possible to prove how worthy they are. But actually, they prefer moderately hard tasks, while people who avoid failure, it's kind of an opposite motive. You don't want to win, you want not to lose. People who avoid this failure usually choose easy, very easy task because you cannot fail. It's so easy, everyone can complete it. Or super hard task, because if you failed in a super hard task, there is no shame in that one. Everyone would fail, right? So there is nothing special with it. But people who are like motivated and they're toward achievements, so they prefer moderately hard tasks and they increase the difficulty slowly based on their performance. It's an interesting fact about like how to provide them with certain tasks at job place to make their job more satisfying. Such people also like tasks when they're personally responsible for the outcome. So they don't really like group projects because in group projects, it's not very clear who is responsible for what. And if the project was successful, who contributed more. So such people be more competitive and they like individual type of projects where they can rely only on themselves. And if they succeed, all the success is theirs. And they choose a task where they can get a lot of feedback because it helps them to grow. So people with high need for achievement can be both very helpful and useful for any type of organization, but they also can be highly competitive and destroying relationships within the organization. It's important to address their needs in correct way and build communication inside the group of people. That way they would have some personal project and they would have space to show themselves and be successful. So such people really adore all type of rewards, including cups, diplomas, certificates, medals, golden stars, anything. They can be just motivated through that. Money is not always important for them. So they just really wish to feel competent and successful in doing what they're doing. In a normal, healthy case, we all experience that. But again, as I said, some people naturally are high achievers, while other people mostly prefer just not to lose, and they're not really focused on that. The second is need for power. Again, couple of interesting research findings on that topic. Basically, again, it's about the impact on other people and often control of other people. So researchers found that need for power correlated with a faster recognition of facial expressions. So most likely those people constantly monitor mimic expressions of other people, trying to understand other interventions, control, and orders are working and how people respond to that. So they make them extremely sensitive to other people's reactions because it's a key to understand are they actually getting power over those people or not. Again, based on itself, need for power is not good and not bad. It depends on how people actually show it, right? On the one hand, society needs good leaders, right? It's true. We need good politicians on all levels, right? We need good managers and good politicians have healthy need for power, but sometimes it can become it can go wrong, and those people might be tyrants and they can abuse their power, right? So it's important to create a certain environment where people with the need for power can express it in the ways appropriate and beneficial for other people. Another interesting finding about the need for power is connected with the so-called gender aspect. So researchers tried to compare other psychological traits and characteristics between men and women who both score high on need for power. And they found that for men, higher need for power connected with impulsive and aggressive behavior, while for women is not. So women who score high on need for power, not prone to impulsive and aggressive behavior, but men are prone to that. It's an interesting result which can be explained in different ways. So we can interpret it differently, but it's important to know probably men in their desire for more power try more things, including risky and aggressive, to assert their dominance. So it's needed to be taken into account again when we build relationships in educational and organizational settings. And finally, need for intimacy. It's about the need for or desire for warm and fulfilling relationships with other people. It's about meaningful contact. So, which is important is to distinguish this with an extroversion, because extroverts usually associate it with being more sociable and gregarious, but it's not the same as a need for intimacy, because extroverts' communication is basically about more superficial contacts and higher number of people you communicate with. It's more superficial, while need for intimacy usually implies that you may have like 1-2 people with whom you communicate, but you communicate with them very deeply. So people who score high on intimacy spend more time during the day thinking about relationships. They report more pleasant emotions when they're around other people. They smile, laugh, and make more eye contact when they're in communication with other people. And they start up conversations more frequently, write more letters and emails and messages. So again, please don't confuse it with an extroversion. It's different. So it's everything what we should discuss in this video about so-called big 3 motives. In next videos, we continue discussing Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Carl Rogers' client-centered approach, and self-determination as an example of modern theory of motivation. Thank you.